Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So taking another fun and exciting episode for you guys this Friday because we're going over some more 3DO M2 emulation in the newest version of MAME. Because a few weeks ago I talked about the fact that Total Vice was basically near to full speed playable within MAME, and there was some sort of improvement behind the scenes that was making that so. And you guys asked about a bunch of different games, and I was actually able to get more games running closer to full speed than I expected by playing around with some of the sliders within MAME in and of itself, as far as the different clock speeds on the PowerPC CPU 1 and 2, as well as the CDDA DSP chip, and that's just a digital signal processor. Not to get too complex, but there are ways to play around with how things run in MAME underneath just playing the game, and I was able to do that here. So right now we are looking at the 3DO M2 footage, and Evil Knight has seen a vast speed increase playing around in the newest version of MAME than I've ever seen before. This is definitely not running as good as something like Total Vice is, but I would still 100% consider this playable so long as you don't care about the audio quality, because it is still a little bit herky-jerky as far as things go. Now moving over to an original 3DO M2 capture of Evil Knight out of my personal collection, you can see these look relatively stable compared to one another, and I will do some side-by-side comparisons as well in just a moment on a locked-off cutscene so you can see how close it gets to the cycle accuracy of original hardware. But pay attention to what the screen looks like here, how the camera pans, and how fast the zombies animate, because you will see in Evil Knight it does drop some frames here and there, and that causes the overall gameplay to get a little bit slower. Now I am not doing any frame skip whatsoever. If you did like a 3-frame skip, you'd probably have a better speed as well, but honestly I stay away from frame skip when I'm talking about these comparisons to show you what everything is doing as far as it is out of the box. And you'll see here as we move back to the M2 capture on MAME, the speed is pretty good. You do have to go into the top left hand corner to reload, at least in my version, but the graphics look like they're put together correctly. There really isn't any visual glitching whatsoever, and that really is more than half the battle, but it seems down to the sound emulation. When that hitches too hard, the game will definitely slow down. There's something in the sound emulation that's causing the overall game speed to drop too low. But you'll see here, at least in this footage, this looks relatively playable, and I would classify this game as 100% playable now. It is not perfection, but obviously finding an original 3DO M2 board for Evil Knight is going to be an exceedingly hard thing. Trust me, I've collected them for years. They come up for sale maybe once every 2 years or so, so MAME really is going to be the way you play this game. Now looking at this cutscene, this is MAME footage right here, and in just a moment I'm going to go side by side MAME and original 3DO M2 hardware so you can see just how close they stick together until they actually separate, and it is down to another sound hitch. So we're going to have the 3DO M2 footage on the left, and we're going to have the MAME footage on the right, and I'm doing it from the first frame in which this door shows a crack in it. That way I know I am locked off, and you're going to see here as we come in, the camera pan adheres the same way, that hard transition hits the same way. It's only when we actually get to the cut of the book does MAME slow down, but that was close to maintaining the same cycle accuracy and the same speed across real original hardware as well as MAME emulation. And because the 3DO M2 really never even released as a home console, the only way to genuinely play these games outside of coming over to my house and bringing some beer and pizza for the effort is going to be to go into MAME. So it is interesting whatever got updated in the most recent MAME, even if there aren't patch notes for M2, definitely improved some of the games. But some games still have issues. Let's move over to Tobe Polystars, one of my favorite hidden gems of all time. We're taking a look at MAME footage here, and I will tell you as we go back and forth on footage. Some people requested that I actually label the sources, but I feel like that's just distracting visually on the corner, so leave me a comment down below and tell me if you really want that. For me, it isn't my favorite thing. You're listening to my voice, so I can kind of direct you through the footage. And you'll see here as we come into Tobe Polystar's police headquarters, this hilarious building that's also a Polystar. It isn't running at full speed, but it does look good. That's what I'm noticing for some of these games here. Graphically, they look like I remember them, and I can compare them against original direct hardware capture footage, but it just doesn't run at the same speed. And for something like a shmup, that is going to definitely affect the gameplay. You'll see here as the camera swoops, it does hitch a little bit, and it's actually dropped down into the world, and the music changes. The game definitely lags pretty heavily there. And again, it seems like it's the sound hitching that's causing a lot of the problem here. But of course, going through the MAME drivers, there really isn't any notes on what could be causing the slowdown. So it'll be interesting if this ever gets improved, what actually brings it up to full speed. but this definitely is a playable quotation mark experience. It's not going to be perfect, but again, I haven't seen a Tobii Polystar's original board sell for like 2 or 3 years now. Let's move over to my original hardware capture, and you're going to see that the game definitely can chug a little bit as you drop down. The frame rate on this version of the game is not perfect on real hardware, and I'm not really sure why that is. This uses 8 megabytes of RAM versus 16 on every other M2 board that have other games on them, so maybe it's just one of those situations. It's struggling a little bit to actually get the data in and out. It is kind of a hard thing to say because this game was made over 30 years ago, but here's your sound sample of what this game sounds like in MAME emulation. There's nothing that's going to bother your ears whatsoever, no screeching noises, it's just a little bit rough, so listen and I'll be right back. Now obviously that does not sound correct, but there's a lot of information we can glean from how it sounded. When the game starts to stutter the audio, you'll notice that the gameplay speed reduced as well. When the audio came clear for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, the game speed also increased. So there seems to be something about that audio hitching that's causing the gameplay issues as far as the speed and emulation is concerned. As we move into the boss here, this is running relatively decently. I'd probably say it's running 55 to 60% of the speed of original hardware. So this is one of those things that I've been noticing a lot as I go through the most recent version of MAME, because you guys asked for a part 2 of this video. When the sound hitches harder, the game slows down. When the sound's running smoothly, the game pretty much gets to full speed. So there's something going on in the sound emulation that is causing the game to slow down. What it is, I don't know, but it seems like a good working direction for anyone who does want to take a look in the future. But again, this is at least still playable, and because it is so rare, it is fun to have this. And if you guys are ever looking for 3D M2 arcade hardware, leave me a comment down below. I actually maintain a list of everyone who wants certain things, because at this point in time I have no desire to collect any more 3D M2 hardware. I have literally everything you could possibly want. That's not a brag, it's to say that every time I find this, I make sure the next person in line gets a shot, and then if they don't want it, I move down the line until somebody does accept it. So it's one of those things, if you want one, leave me a comment down below. As we move back over to original hardware footage here, you're going to see again, this is what the gameplay speed should be, but it doesn't really matter if MAME isn't getting to the gameplay speed yet, because it is seeing improvements. Visually, it seems like MAME emulation is doing everything correctly in 4 out of the 5 games that are on the 3DO M2, and that is always a great thing, because if you move back over to MAME footage here, aside of the fact that I have bilinear filtering turned off because I don't like how it looks in MAME versus the original hardware, this looks like Tobii Polystars. All of the colors, all of the pixels, all of the polygons are there. So it seems like in Bulldog emulation on the visual side, they're pretty much good to go, unless we're talking about Battletris, because you guys all asked about this game. It is the one game that definitely I would not recommend trying to check out on MAME. And again, that's not a strike on MAME. It's always impressive what it does. I'm just talking about the current situation here. So you can get in-game on Battletris. There is a lot of visual corruption. Like Najid's weapon she's holding in her hand there have the completely wrong texture, and that floating sphere in the background should look like a satellite with a camera on it broadcasting the fight, but it definitely is corrupted here. But I would say you can get this game running like 35 to 40% of the speed that it would on original hardware. And the interesting thing about this game, at least the game disc in and of itself, if you look at the file contents or the Opera FS reader, or you bring it into the SDK, the build CD is completely different file-wise than any other game I've ever seen on the 3DO M2. Usually there is a big file and folder structure. Battletris basically has one file, so it's using some sort of functionality on the 3DO M2 hardware, some call to the Bulldog ASIC or otherwise, that is not currently strung together correctly in MAME emulation. And I only mention that because I've gone through all of the files of all of these games, and Battletris has always looked different as far as how it's actually built. But I do have the SDK available, so I can always open things up in there. Obviously I don't have the source code, but it is a fun peek behind the scenes. So whatever's going on in emulation in MAME with Battletris is probably down to the fact that Konami did something different with this game than they did with every other game on the 3DO M2. But hey, at least you can get in game and you can actually see it running even if it has a lot of corruption. And some of the corruption is absolutely hilarious, like this third stage here against Sengoku. The entire bodies of both characters are completely missing. It's like playing a really weird version of Rayman. But you guys asked to see what the other games on MAME were doing for 3DO M2, so here are the three I wanted to cover. Heat of Love in 98 was a slideshow, and it's not really that fun of a game, so don't worry about that one too much. But we are done. Hopefully the next version of MAME is something even better. If you enjoy these MAME videos, leave me a comment down below. Bye-bye.